Are there any bills for introduction? There are no bills for introduction. The House then comes to questions for oral answer, and the first question stands in the name of Dr. Russel Norman.
Mr. Speaker.
Dr. Russel Norman.
Mr. Speaker, my question is to the Prime Minister and asks, in relation to the government's asset sales policy, does he stand by his reported comments that he has yet to see any official advice on the so-called bonus scheme for people who buy shares?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, yes, I've seen advice very generally that mentions a range of possible incentives, but bonus shares have not been subject to any specific advice to date.
Dr. Russel Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the cost of such a loyalty scheme, which could be up to $400 million, appear in the budget that his government presented to Parliament less than a month ago, or in his government's asset sales legislation?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, it appears in the budget in so much that the budget documents showed the indicative range of returns that the government was likely to receive for the mixed ownership model. In terms of the numbers they're making up, the member is just continually demonstrating to the public of New Zealand he knows absolutely nothing about the capital markets.
Supplementary question, the Honourable. Point of order. Sorry, Dr. Russel Norman, point of order.
Sorry, Mr. Speaker, my question was about whether the costs of the loyalty scheme appeared in the budget. The Prime Minister talked about the revenue in the budget, but not about the cost.
I beg the member's pardon, but I clearly heard the Prime Minister say yes, it was included in the budget. The Honourable Clayton Cosgrove.
To the Prime Minister. Isn't his so-called bonus or loyalty scheme simply an expensive scam designed to keep Kiwis holding on to their shares until sometime after the next election?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
No, Mr. Speaker, a scam was the Labour Party's economic policies that we inherited.
The Right Honourable Winston Peters.
If these asset sales and shares to mum and dad New Zealanders is such a wonderful idea and a great investment for them, what happened to the Auckland Airport as you wanted to sell it?
Order. The member just ask his question, please.
Well, I'm just talking to the...
No. We don't...
The corpse...
No, order. The member will now resume his seat. Could I say to some of the National Party backbenchers, some interjections can be unhelpful. The Right Honourable Winston Peters, please.
I'm asking the Prime Minister, if these asset sales and the investment made by mum and dad New Zealanders, or the few of them that get it, is such a good idea, why on earth would they need a bonus scheme?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, what we have seen around the world is loyalty schemes have been effective in providing a reason for people that might otherwise not have chosen to buy shares to engage. But New Zealand First doesn't have to worry about that because, as Andrew Williams told us last night, if they get half a chance, they'll be raising $7 to $10 billion or whatever to buy them back.
Don't need that last part. Dr. Russel Norman.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the Prime Minister accept that a bonus scheme in which those who buy shares are given extra shares for free will be a cost on the Crown?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, no. And I think it's quite interesting, actually, that the member is now starting to talk about where the Crown might be prepared to forego a part of the sale proceeds to ensure that New Zealanders are at the front of the queue with the maximum distribution to the right range of New Zealanders. If the government simply wanted to maximise its return, it would sell 100% of the assets to whoever came first, like Labour did with the 15 assets they sold.
Michael Woodhouse.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the Prime Minister, what are the benefits of the government selling minority shareholdings in 4 energy SOEs?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the benefits are very clear. First, it helps us control government debt, which is a huge problem around the world. The government will reinvest the expected proceeds of between $5 and $7 billion into things like modern hospitals and schools without having to borrow more from overseas lenders. Second, there will be widespread New Zealand ownership with Kiwis at the front of the queue for shares in big New Zealand infrastructure companies. And third, it will help invigorate our capital markets and build stronger commercial disciplines in each of the companies involved.
Dr. Russel Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Is the Prime Minister aware of the document by the Australian Taxation Office, regarding the Queensland Rail bonus share issuing, which states very clearly that the state will transfer loyalty bonus shares to the retail investor from its retained holding of shares? And how is transferring free shares not a cost to the Crown?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, what I said earlier was it has an impact on the maximum return that the government has, but the government is not looking to get the maximum return possible, because if it was, it would sell 100% of the assets to a trade buyer, almost certainly from overseas. That was the model set up by Labour, and they did it very effectively in the 1980s, late 80s, but that's not what this government is trying to do. It's going to have majority ownership, it's going to transfer shares to New Zealanders who will be at the front of the queue, and it may choose to give some retail investors in New Zealand the opportunity to have a slightly better deal than others.
The Honourable Trevor Mallard.
Further his comment about Labour sales, does he accept that that occurred not this decade, not the last decade, not the decade before that, but the decade before that, that as a result of that, the Honourable Phil Goff, myself and the Honourable Annette King all lost their seats, that Labour did not get back into power for 9 years, that they now understand, that we now understand that Kiwis don't like it?
Order. There'll be no more interjections when I'm on my feet. I think that was heading somewhat into a speech. I think the order. I think the gist of the question, though, got through. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, no. I understand.
Order. No, the Prime Minister won't answer it yet. I apologise. I didn't call the Prime Minister, but the member argues he hadn't finished asking his question. But I clearly heard him at the start. Is it correct? I think he said at the start, and that is the question, and he went adding a whole lot more to it, and I think the Prime Minister can answer at least whether part of it's correct. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, yes, I accept it happened quite a long time ago. Yes, I accepted that Trevor Mallard was in Parliament then, and all that process shows is that for Labour it's a hell of a lot easier to get rid of assets than it is Trevor Mallard.
Mr. Speaker.
Is that point of order or supplementary question? Oh, the Right Honourable Winston Peters. The Right Honourable Winston Peters, supplementary question.
Was the Prime Minister's statement that...
Order.
Was the Prime Minister's statement that Dr. Russell Norman didn't understand capital markets because he fails, Mr. Norman, to grasp the shonky, corrupt practices of Merrill Lynch, which brought the American economy and the Western world's economy to their very knees?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I have absolutely no responsibility as Prime Minister of New Zealand for Merrill Lynch, but all I can say, it was a bloody good company when I was there.
The Honourable Trevor Mallard.
Has the Prime Minister briefed his backbenchers on the fact that New Zealanders like asset sales less now than they did in the 1980s, and that they are likely to lose their seats and not be back for 9 years?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, and yes, they like Trevor Mallard less now than they did in the 1980s.
Dr. Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What right does his government have to give away up to $400 million of taxpayer wealth in the form of free share giveaways without parliamentary authority? And has he not read the Constitution Act, which states it shall not be lawful for the Crown, except by or under an Act of Parliament, to spend any public money?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, for a start, if there's legislation going through Parliament that gives the national-led government, with the support of its partners, the right to go through the mixed ownership model. Secondly, if it comes to giving away money, maybe the member should go and talk to his caucus, because all I ever hear them wanting to do is give away taxpayers' money to other New Zealanders.
Yeah. Dr. Russell Norman.
Can the Prime Minister...
Order. I want to hear Dr. Russell Norman's question.
Can the Prime Minister point to any clauses in the Mixed Ownership Model Bill or any lines within Budget 2012 that authorise the government to spend up to $400 million on giving away free shares in the mixed ownership model companies?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the government isn't giving away $400 million and it isn't giving away free shares to the order of magnitude that the member has claimed. It may or may not have a loyalty bonus, we will see, but the government all the way through has said it won't be maximising its return. If it was to do that, it would follow the Labour Party model of selling 100% and selling it to foreigners.
Dr Russell Norman.
When will he be seeking legal authority from the Parliament to spend money in the form of a share giveaway?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, if the member wants to go to the budget, it's quite clearly laid out the government's program, the anticipated return that the Crown will get, the costs likely to be associated. Mr. Speaker, that gives the government, from everything I can see, the authority.
Point of order, Dr Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I seek leave to table the document from the Australian Taxation Office, which indicates that the state will be giving away shares as far as the Australian Taxation Office is concerned in the Queensland model.
Leave is sought to order. Order. This is a point of order. Leave is sought to table that document. Is there any objection?
Yes, also the test.
Oh, there is objection. Question number 2, Paul Goldsmith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Finance and asks